Hello, I want to talk about Confucianism. Confucius is sort of one of these guys who I find Confucius to be a very interesting fellow. He actually his entire life wanted um, to become a great, powerful leader, and he was offered places within different states and given authority, but really never got the power and convinced China to embrace his ideas as much as he wanted. To a large degree, I like to think of Confucius largely as almost a political philosopher. He was wanting to try to get and try to encourage and teach the idea of things that would improve the state. And for him, the idea is that in life there are relationships, and all of life is ruled by relationships. That, for example, there's a relationship between like father and son, or parent and child. There's a relationship between like boss and worker, older friend, older sibling, younger sibling. And there's 5 key relationships. I forget what the other one is right offhand. But the idea here is that these are the 5 relationships that exist for all of us. And that there are these 5 relationships that exist, these 5 relationships, and that, it's all about how you're supposed to conduct yourself, the propriety, and how you show respect, how you teach the younger or teach the lesser, and how you handle yourself. And that by doing that, you can, you basically create a civil society. It's all about relationships, respect, and how we guide these relationships. Now, part of what Confucius did was Confucius wrote a series of sort of sayings that, to a large degree, and if you watch that video, and as you should, after you watch it, you'll kind of get this idea, the Bill Moyers and Houston Smith video, that you'll get this idea of you'll get this idea of teaching sayings that they would teach these sayings, that they would give these books of Confucian sayings, Confucian children's books, basically, and that people would read them and study them as children, and that by doing so, they would learn about proper rules, proper roles, and that they would basically memorize and study these rules about how you behave. And in that video, he sort of, Moyer says, well, I'm thinking about like, see Dick run, see Dick's, do this, see Dick do that. And he's, sort of very similar way that, kids would memorize and learn and read these books, and that would be a very big part of the education, would be learning these ethical sayings, ethical rules. Now, Confucius never really realized the full desire to influence society like he had hoped, but he did end up having during his lifetime. But after he died, his work became very influential, and many states adapted it and created educational systems that were very influenced by him, that they began to teach Confucian sayings, and that they began to implement that in daily practice. And so this became a very big part. You would learn these rules, and you would learn proper behavior, proper roles within society, and how you were to behave. And part of, out of Confucianism grew a very large, what we would call a meritocracy, that China became very much a system that was very ruled by the state. And what they would do is you would learn, you'd go to these Confucian schools, and they were very big on rules of ethics and propriety, but also education. And those who stood out would eventually get promoted and get jobs in the government, and that those people would then become leaders. But they were also expected that if you became a leader and you became somebody great, that you would then, repay those with whom you went to school. That if you grew up in, I don't know, like if you grew up in a little town, like here in, you grew up in some little town of like 400 people here in Central Illinois, and you ended up doing very well, and you advanced, and you got a great job in the federal government in DC, that while you would while you became the governor or something else, that you would make sure to repay those in your community. That, so there was this idea of a very strict education, but also a repayment, and this very strict system that developed. Now, Confucianism waned for a few years in China under communism, but at the same time it still remained, and there's definitely been more of a push to reintroduce it, that they believe that the rules of Confucianism, the propriety, how you treat, how you handle these relationships is very important, and that's begun to return even more in recent years. Although there were a few years, I think, where, a few decades where that was not as impressed. But, as far as it goes, communism is atheistic, and so there was some worry about that. But Confucianism really is not, is more atheistic. It's more about how you handle relationships than it is about gods and other things.